This is Consciousness Central, the daily show from the Science of Consciousness Conference 2016, coming to you from beautiful Tucson, Arizona. Beautiful sunshine here. My name's Nick Day. I'll be your host for the next 4 days of programming with interviews, conversations, a visit to the posters. We'll dip in and out and see what's going on, some musical items, mystery items, and who knows what else. Stay with us for the next 4 days. Welcome. So I'm very honored to welcome to Consciousness Central 2016 Dr. Rudolph Tanzi, who is a neuroscientist and geneticist at Harvard Medical School, I believe.
That's right.
Where you're working.
Yes.
And you are a pioneer in genetics, and it seems as if you're really breaking exciting new grounds. Could you just give me an overview of what's going on at Harvard right now?
So I run a research center at Massachusetts General Hospital, and I'm professor of neurology at Harvard. And I spend most of my time studying Alzheimer's disease, learning what's going wrong with the brain as we get older, and starting with genetics. So the plan is, I discovered most of the known Alzheimer's genes, including the first ones. And then once we have the genes and we see these mutations in the genes that cause the disease, we then try to understand what goes wrong in the brain, and then that tells us what we need to fix. But along the way, you also learn a lot about how the brain works. I mean, one of the best ways to learn about how something works is to see it not working. And that's probably how, my interest in just consciousness and the brain in general and what is mind was inspired by this lifelong quest to try to cure Alzheimer's disease.
Yeah. So I gather you've found some useful information coming from Stuart Hameroff and Roger Penrose, who, of course, Stuart is the founder of this conference. How did that happen? What happened there?
Well, we have to go back to the pathology of Alzheimer's, and there are three pillars of pathology. There are these plaques, which are like these big gunky things that accumulate outside of nerve cells, and then we showed recently in what's called Alzheimer's in a dish, where we grow a mini brain in a petri dish. This was a big breakthrough for us last year, paper in Nature, where we showed that we could actually take human nerve cells made from stem cells, grow them in a gel matrix like a mini brain, get them to make the plaques. And then, as a result, the plaques caused those nerve cells to make tangles inside. The tangles are made up of this protein called tau, and tau is normally bound to microtubules. And Stuart Hameroff and Roger Penrose came up with an idea that memory is stored in the brain in microtubules, where the plus-minus polarity of microtubules, many of them, shifting, is acting almost like a JPEG in terms of storing memory data. And what we know is that, and this was debated for a long time, does the amyloid plaque really caused the tangles? And that debate was only settled after 3 decades last year, when we didn't have to use mice anymore, because mice just don't recapitulate the disease. We learned the hard way, humans are not 150-pound mice. So when you take, with stem cell technology, grow human nerve cells, grow them in a mini brain, cause them to make the plaques, wait, sure enough, the tangles come after that. And then the microtubules become destabilized, and the nerve cells don't fire right. We can actually see them firing in the dish. We're seeing neural networks made in a little dish in this mini brain. And then eventually the nerve cells die. And what's nice about this is now we can actually separate the temporal order of what goes wrong in Alzheimer's over decades in just a matter of weeks in a dish. So it's made drug screening 10 times faster, studies to understand the disease 10 times faster, and most importantly, probably about 10 or 20 times cheaper, because we don't have to use mice to do it. And it also makes a lot of the animal rights people happy. And as a vegetarian, it makes me happy as well, that we can not have to rely on little furry creatures so much.
Okay.
Yeah, so we've learned a lot. We've learned a lot about this. And the big question now is, when the amyloid causes the tangles, what is causing the cognitive problems? Simply the nerve cells dying and the synapses being lost? Or is it, as maybe Stuart and Roger would propose, the microtubules are no longer stabilized, so you don't have the substrate for memory? And the fact is, we don't know yet. I mean, but now at least we have a system where we can test this. So we're going to work with Stuart to try all kinds of different things to try to stabilize those microtubules and ask if we let everything go wrong, let the amyloid form in the dish, let the tangles form, but somehow stabilize the microtubules so there's still, the integrity is still there, will the nerve cells still fire correctly? Will the nerve cells die? I think that'd be a nice test to see how the Penrose-Hameroff hypothesis of memory may apply to Alzheimer's disease pathogenesis.
Okay, so that could be good for their theory, and obviously very good if it works to help with
Patients,
Alzheimer's and patients. Have you also looked at this transcranial ultrasound system as well? Is that something that is on your radar?
To be honest, it's looking more and more like, if you look across non-invasive technologies, I should say that, I'm old-fashioned. We're making drugs that stop the amyloid or stop the tangles and finding those through the dish. And we actually have hits, and we're going into clinical trials, and it's the old pharmaceutical way. But, non-invasive means of treatment using technology has become very hot, right? So if you look across different studies, it seems like just about any way in which you add energy to the brain, you get a result. Ultrasound, there were results in mice in Australia. Our own lab, thanks to a fellow I met here, Barn, who sent his postdoc to me, we're using radio frequency waves to stop the pathology. That seems to be working as well. If you use direct current, that seems to work. Even deep brain stimulation. So there's really no one way to do this, I don't think. I think somehow when you stimulate the brain with electromagnetic energy in different ways, with very high frequency or low frequency, high intensity, low intensity, that you're able to affect the pathology. And this has got me thinking, how can all these different methods all seem to work? I mean, we're developing a way to do what's called deep brain radio frequency stimulation. And that's totally unique to our lab. We're letting other labs take care of ultrasound. Stuart's going to be doing a clinical trial on ultrasound. We have a national clinical trial center in my hospital at Mass General for Alzheimer's. We're hoping, if it looks good, we'll do a larger trial there. So take lots of shots on goal and see what sticks. But I would love to not have to give people drugs, and and have a nice little helmet you could wear, while you're watching the news at night, and go to bed and have your pathology go away. Wouldn't that be nice?
That would be amazing.
Yeah.
Yes. So another interesting area, you were talking last night in the opening workshop on this subject of epigenetics and some of the kind of an interesting aspect to that, which is that genetic, what would you say? What would you call it? Genetic attributes can be passed down from generation to generation. So, for example, somebody who suffers a trauma, perhaps, there may be some kind of echo genetically through to their offspring and maybe even grandchildren. Can you talk about that? Because it's a very fascinating subject.
Yeah, so let's first put it in perspective with Alzheimer's disease, right? So what is epigenetics? Even though you can't change the genes your parents have given you, in many ways your lifestyle at every moment is changing the activity, or what we call the expression of your genes. And there are many different ways to change gene expression. But particularly when you have certain habits and do things the same way every day, sleep cycle, how much do you exercise, what do you eat, is it junk food or is it good food, do you meditate, are you stressed out? These things with habit eventually program your genes. And your habits are reflected in your gene expression programs. This is the process of what's called epigenetics, where literally your DNA is chemically modified based on how you're living your life so that gene expression programs adapt to your habits. And the reason for this is that, let's say you're eating a junk food diet at McDonald's every day. So you're causing massive inflammation in your body with all the fats and the carbs and the high salt. So your gene expression changes to help you deal with that. All these different genes turn up and down, on and off to say, look, the guy's eating crap. We got to keep him alive. So the genes compensate. Most of the time in nature, when there's compensation to keep you alive because you're doing something bad for yourself, that compensation will eventually be bad for you. called antagonistic pleiotropy. What's good for you right now to keep you going, and remember, your genes always just want to keep you going long enough to reproduce and get out of here. Although that might not be so true as we evolve. It's another story. But basically, as your genes are trying to keep you alive, let's say it's inflammation. Inflammation helps you stay alive because it fights bacteria. It helps you to, it's meant to be a defense mechanism. But too much inflammation takes out your tissues and can cause heart disease, diabetes, Alzheimer's, et cetera. So your habits are very important, and your gene expression programs are very important. Now, the reason why this is so important for Alzheimer's is that if you take mice with Alzheimer's disease, where you put Alzheimer's genes into them, and they get certain specific pathologies, and you ask, how does the mouse deal with it? And you look at the epigenetics in the mouse, all these different genes we found by genetic studies of families are the genes that seem to get modified, validating that these are the right genes that we found. It seems like genes that might have nothing to do with how you give Alzheimer's to this mouse are turning up and down these specific genes that already came up in genetic studies as risk factors for Alzheimer's, showing that gene expression of the genes that are involved with risk for the disease can also offset the disease by compensating. So this is important because when we look at the different mutations in genes that cause Alzheimer's, only 5% guarantee disease. So of all the genes, we found 30 different genes. We have hundreds and hundreds of different mutations. 5% of mutations are fully penetrant, meaning they guarantee the disease. In the vast majority of Alzheimer's, the gene mutations or variations in DNA you inherit from mom and dad increase your susceptibility, but can be mitigated. Your lifestyle can mitigate the risk by changing your gene expression through epigenetics. And this depends on how you live your life and the big habit categories you have to think about it: diet, sleep, exercise, emotional stability, stress management, and we've added meditation as a practice. So as you might imagine, meditation, stress, and emotions are all under one category. Then you have diet, and you have exercise and sleep. And we've, in our book, Super Genes, we go through what you need to do in each of these categories to get your gene profiles to best foster health and well-being versus work against you. But it all starts with your habits. So this is good news, right? It's good news that it means that you can do things to help stave off disease thanks to epigenetics, regardless of what mom and dad gave you, dealt you as genes.
Okay, Rudy Tanzi, thank you very much for talking to us this afternoon.
Cameron Keys here, your roving reporter. We're here at the opening night ceremony. Everybody is scattered around having drinks and talking, so we're going to go swoop in and see if we can get a sense of the flavor of the conference this week. Tell us who you are and a little bit about what you're looking forward to here at the conference.
I think that's exactly the question I'm asking. Who am I and what am I doing here? What's my purpose? So isn't that the most important question? My name is Saurav Ghosh. I'm an assistant professor of neurology and pharmacology at Yale University School of Medicine. I think this is the most important fundamental question, and I'm here to find out. I'm here to learn about.
That's who I am, Zen Master Jay, and that's what I'm interested in. Not two and not one.
All right.
Yeah.
I dig it.
I'm Dr. Robert Alexander, and I'm from the University of Michigan. I'm working with Hannes Bend. We're using virtual reality and biofeedback to support consciousness, mindfulness, and meditation through deep relaxation.
My name is Dr. Hasmukh Taylor, and I was ex-professor from UCF, University of Central Florida, and I'm here to talk about how this universe we see is a hologram, and how is that connected with consciousness and awareness.
My name is Björn. I'm a PhD student in Oslo in Norway, and I'm here to learn about how the brain states, change when you go from unconscious to conscious states and back again.
Yeah, that's a key theme even today of the plenary talks.
Yeah, definitely.
My name's Tucker Peck. I'm a clinical psychologist. I run a clinic here in Tucson, and I teach meditation. I'm an adjunct professor at University of Arizona as well.
All right.
I'm Brian Krummenacker. I'm a first-year graduate student here at University of Arizona's psychology program. So just kind of checking things out. I'm interested in phenomenology of effort, effortful processing, that kind of thing. So this is all very interesting to me.
Yeah, Baba Brinkman, Tucson Consciousness, doing a wrap-up. Check it out. This is Baba Brinkman, recording live from Consciousness Central, bringing you the Tucson Science of Consciousness info, giving you the essentials to explain what's subjective and sensual, making love to your mental, cause I'm the consciousness nympho. Any theory I'll F with it, whether it's daft or exquisite, whether it's backed by the facts or suffering an evidence deficit. This is Tucson, where the tent is hella broad. It's half science lab and half Burning Man afternoon workshop. Day 1, Plenary 1, Stand to Hain Kiddush kicked it off on the global neuronal workspace and how the system evolved to broadcast information across neocortical space. The same way I'm broadcasting this, achieving fame in your brain. Check the meta context. The parallels are insane. My distributed sensory signal is spreading through your membrane. Consciousness explained via simple rap and rhyming. It doesn't become conscious until it metastasizes. Hence, I'm broadcasting live. You're getting a spike of activation. It doesn't become conscious till hundreds of milliseconds later, and Stan the man can mask it and make sure you forget it. Like a mouse in a maze, hooked up to optogenetics, computational. It's 10 to the 16 operations a second, but according to Stuart Hammerhoff, that's off by like 11 orders of magnitude. It's really 10 to the 27 operations per second in a quantum superposition, so there's no consensus. The conference is gonna fall apart if the theories are not in the same galaxy, never mind ballpark. So let's talk about a theory mostly ignored so far by the mainstream neuroscientists. OR. Take a dose of psilocybin, let go of social approval, and bing, wrap your mind around the molecular structure of tubulin and the fluctuations of benzene pi-electron resonance. Try your best to figure out what its quantum superposition is. Bing, better be quick. It's gonna reverse polarity. It disappears if you stare at it with a heart full of no charity. It's got bing, but it's still too indeterminate to measure. The evolution of life began with primordial proto-pleasure. Darwinians talk about surviving and getting by, but Stewart's theory is more like vibing and getting high. It's about emojis resonating with oscillational sounds. I need a hit. That's some good transcranial ultrasound. Stewart used to have a persecution complex. No one wants me. Lately, he's more like the orc OR Rocky with the eye of the tiger, baby. Comeback kid cocky. Now that his waveform collapsed into collaborations with Noam Chomsky, but I sense a discrepancy between the sensory data that Stewart gets and the preconceptions etched in his gray matter. He could link quantum gender superposition to cross-dressing. Anil Seth would call it predictive processing. Consciousness is a Bayesian fantasy constrained by reality, which explains Stewart's everything is quantum mentality. He's got a smoke detector that's constantly going off, like a virtual reality set that over-identifies dogs, cause sensory data is noisy and conspicuous, which makes a quantum false alarm seem extremely conspicuous. The question is, will anyone snap him out of his trance? Who's gonna stick a fork in Stewart's rubber hand? God damn, did I go too far? That was mean, that's my nature though. I'm a frickin' beast machine, just ask Anil Seth. That's the animal in man. I predict myself, therefore I am. Tucson, Consciousness Central. Baba Brinkman, wrapping up the plenaries. Peace out.
My next guest is Robert J Sawyer, who is a science fiction writer, an award-winning science fiction writer from Canada, who's coming down to TSC 2016 to give a couple of talks about the relationship between science fiction and the whole field of consciousness. Rob, welcome to Consciousness Central.
Thank you, Nick.
Tell me about this, your interest in consciousness and how you weave the subject somehow into your work.
Yes, one of my definitions for science fiction is it's the literature of intriguing juxtapositions. It's where disciplines that would not normally interact in day-to-day life come together, you bang them together and see what sparks fly. And to me, consciousness studies is the most multidisciplinary area of exploration in human creative thought these days. It brings together neuroscientists, artificial intelligence researchers, evolutionary biologists, child development psychologists, and of course philosophers and religious folks as well, to all try to make sense of why it is like something to be awake and alive. And so it seems a natural pairing to me. My paradigm of science fiction, disparate genres of or disciplines coming together, and this particular topic, consciousness, the inner life, just seemed to perfectly meld for me. And so out of my 23 novels, I haven't tallied it up, but I'd say at least half deal with the nature of consciousness.
So how do you as a writer take that and sort of filter it through your creative thinking and produce something that's fun, readable, exciting, interesting, and your readers will want to come back for more and you win an award? How does that happen?
Well, this is the principal thing. You know, when Stuart wants to talk about OR, he can bring up a PowerPoint and take you through it. And if you're excited by that material, you may be excited. But in general, PowerPoints are death, right? And what I have to do is tell an exciting story with a beginning, a middle, and an end, and arcs for the characters where they grow and change and either succeed or fail at worthwhile goals that they've been pursuing during the course of the narrative. And that's how you structure it. So for instance, I wanted to talk a lot about the nature of consciousness and whether or not, in fact, there are different degrees to which we are conscious. In my novel, my current novel, Quantum Night, I riff on Stuart and Roger. They said, basically, you're either conscious or you're not. Stuart is an anesthesiologist. He can make you have no consciousness. In fact, you will sue him if he fails to do that in the operating theater, right? If you wake up, the anesthesiologist is in a lot of trouble. He can reliably take away your consciousness, and he can reliably give it back after the procedure is finished by the surgeon. I postulated that maybe there are not just the on and off. It's not binary, but there's three levels. There's the no consciousness, Stuart and I agree about that. There's a basic level, and then I bring in, this is what I love about consciousness studies. Let's go and find a philosopher. Let's go find David Chalmers and the philosophical zombie idea, the notion that there might be people for whom the lights are on, but nobody's home. There is no inner life. There's obviously information processing, but there's no inner voice. And that would be a first level of consciousness. Then a second level where you have self-awareness, but that's it. You're basically completely self-absorbed, a psychopathic condition. And a third level where you have a reflection back on that inner voice, that inner life, sort of that thing that we call conscience. And that would be the highest level. And I riff on the model they had about electrons and hydrophobic pockets in the tubulin dimers of the cytoskeletal microtubule infrastructure of neuronal tissue, which is a huge mouthful to say. So you have to dole it out in little pieces as you go along. But more than that, you have to construct a narrative where I say, okay, I want to explore this idea. Let's have a guy who currently is at that third level, discovers, unbeknownst to him, that he had previously been at both of the previous two levels. And maybe at the second level, when he had no conscience, only consciousness, that he had done terrible things. And suddenly you have a mystery story, a thriller, a chase, people who don't want him to discover the truth, and you're able to parcel out this very recondite stuff that Stuart and Roger have come up with in digestible pieces. So the trick of writing any piece of fiction is it's not boring exposition if the character desperately needs to know that fact at that time to save his or her life. Then it's page-turning prose that the reader is devouring, and that's the trick of writing a good, compelling story.
Excellent. Robert, this book is Quantum Night?
Quantum Night.
Okay, we'll give it a plug because it sounds amazing. I'm really looking forward to reading it when I can.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for coming along today. This is very interesting.
Oh, my
I
pleasure.
love the way it's almost as if, we have the science, we have the philosophers trying to sort of create this description, and then the storytellers who are also providing a narrative to people so that knowledge is shared.
Science fiction is sometimes called the literature of ideas, and philosophy is the discipline of ideas. So I think philosophy and science fiction go together really well. I would personally, in fact, call it philosophical fiction, call it fi-fi instead of sci-fi, and we would still have a very vigorous genre. Nick, thank you so much.
Beautiful. Thanks again. Robert J. Sawyer. So here at Consciousness Central 2016. We're here once again with our roving reporter and plenary analyst, Cameron Keyes, who's been sitting in on some of the talks this afternoon. So Cameron is going to tell us all about it. What's the hot topic and the news of this year?
So we start today with a series of plenaries going today and tomorrow called 5 Paths Toward Consciousness. So in keeping with the theme of the conference that we're going from toward a science of consciousness to now sort of consolidating something like a science of consciousness, these first days are going to give us an overview of some of the key available theories. So today we're going to look at the global neuronal workspace model, which is perhaps one of the most robust of the models, has lots of experimental data. The higher order thought models, the predictive coding, and then ORCO-R, the orchestrated rejective reduction model. And so today we heard from Stanislas Dehaene, Anil Seth, and Stuart Hameroff. Dehaene is one of the key proponents of the global neuronal workspace model. So he told us about a series of experiments that he's done trying to separate unconscious from conscious stimuli. So how do you determine whether someone, one good way to determine whether someone is conscious or not conscious when they're in an experimental setting is to try to find that sweet spot where some of the stimuli that you give them are not perceived consciously and some of them are. So then you can track where those brain waves are going and how those stimuli are processed in unconscious and conscious experiments and then determine sort of some of the correlates. So what he talked about was, for example, he thinks that the function of consciousness is to have a global broadcast of a chunk of information that's relevant to the organism. So how that happens, he's saying, is that the visual stimuli, for example, if you give a subject, say, a letter or a word or something, and you flash it only for 16 milliseconds, you can watch that signal propagate through the brain to different regions. And different parts of the brain will evaluate it, do some statistical analysis of it, he thinks, and then eventually it gets to a point a few hundred milliseconds later where there's this global broadcast, a bunch of different regions of the brain light up, and the different brain waves become more amplified or suppressed. So like gamma brain waves become more amplified, alpha waves can become a little bit more suppressed, and then beta waves can also become a little more suppressed. So the overall point that Dehaene is making is that the function of consciousness is to broadcast to many different regions of the brain some important piece of information that needs to be consciously accessed in order to have associations. And so Anil Seth is talking about the predictive coding model. Predictive coding, the basic idea is that the brain has it's also a statistical inference machine. Both of the first two speakers would emphasize that the brain is a really powerful mathematician, that even unconscious processing has these remarkable capabilities to evaluate stimuli. And then in Anil Seth's case, he's saying that we form expectations about how objects in the world might behave in the near future. So if you think, say, like, a baseball player, there's this famous case about how can a baseball player actually hit the ball when it's coming when they have such a narrow window of time in order to decide whether to swing. So Anil Seth is saying that any object around us, we're forming mental models of the possible movements that object might take in the near future. And so he uses, it's famous called Bayesian reasoning, where you form a prior belief about what might happen in the world, and then when the external world imposes on you, then you revise your beliefs about what you expect, and then over time you become more adaptive and you can accurately perceive objects in the world. So he told us about a multidisciplinary group of experiments to try to isolate how that predictive coding might work actually inside the brain. So Stuart Hameroff told us about specifically focusing on the mechanisms inside the brain that that may be useful in any one of these other paths toward consciousness. So the key part of the brain that all three of today's speakers recognize is relevant to consciousness are a particular layer of the cortex and this layer 5 of the cortex. And there are these cells that are shaped like pyramids inside this layer of the brain. And the dendrites inside of those pyramidal cells have some important role to play in this broadcasting function, and then therefore in this distinction between which things are unconscious and which things are conscious. So Stewart zoomed in on those dendrites inside these pyramidal neurons and says, well, what's their structure? What are their physical properties? And he is arguing that the way that these neurons work basically is off of quantum sort of electron clouds inside the chemical structure of these neurons. And so as you know, Stewart famously speaking about quantum biology and the importance of quantum biology in some of the difficult problems in consciousness. So what he suggested is that, say under general anesthesia, the way that anesthesia works is to erase or to dull the effects of these quantum fluctuations in these neurons. And so for Hameroff, the key to deciding, to coming up with a science of consciousness is to really, over time, think more clearly and deeply about the nanostructure and even lower structures that make up the neurons. And so tomorrow we'll hear more from other paths of consciousness, and over the course of the week I'm sure we'll get hopefully some clarification of the disagreements and some ways of moving forward. So
excellent.
It was a good day.
As always, an excellent roundup, Cameron. It sounds like a very stimulating start to the conference. Big crowds here, full house.
Hundreds and hundreds of folks.
Yes.
They're flooding into the Kiva Ballroom down the road, and packed house, and it'll continue to be so.
All right, we're looking forward to a few days of fun and games here in the wonderful world of consciousness. Thanks again, Cameron Keyes, and we'll see you again tomorrow.
Where does the knowledge come from? Empiricists falsely believe all knowledge comes from sensing. But we rationalists know the truth. Knowledge comes from thinking. Yes, Barry?
There ain't nothing in the mind would change. Been in the sensation. Let me take you on a sensation vacation. Through sense experience, the mind is created, as well as rules to process raw senses data. For empiricists, yeah, this is the word. Tabula rasa, a blank slate to the word. When we are born, there are no thoughts in our mind, but through experience, they're built up over time. They say the source of truth about the world outside is human reason inside of your mind. Must not succumb to sensual seduction, must overcome irrational deduction. Locked up in logic in the search for what's real, cut off from the senses, they forget how to feel. They try to deny. therefore I exist. The one and only certain truth you insist.
Highest form of knowledge.
Distrust your senses and all you know to be true. But you can't deny the thinking mind of me and of you. Gotta ask you now, baby. Is it really all so sensual? Is it really all sensual? Oh, is it really all sensual? Is it really
Mathematical.
all sensual?
Philosophical.
I can justify. I can testify. I can justify. I can testify.
Hey, rationalism is on top, cause lately empiricism has gone pop. There ain't no tabula rasa, John Locke. Better check your senses against logic non-stop. No conspiracy, lyrically I empirically expose the heresy and empiricism fearlessly. It's mathematical, not magical. Radical sense data on its own is just not rational. Ask a developmental psychologist. Descartes was right, we have innate knowledges, not Platonic forms like Plato thought it was. Darwin explains how they became part of us. The brain is too complicated for blank slate. It's organized in advance of experience, baby, and that's a priori. So a posteriori can kiss my posterior, alright?
Some things the senses cannot perceive. Sometimes reason cannot take you where it's trying to lead. They both have limits, baby. Soon you'll see how it all comes down to somewhere in between. Somewhere in between.
Experiential. Rational.
Empiricism is a little irrational.
Rationalism fights back.
Get a little rational, you might like my flavor.
A priori or a posteriori. That just makes me wonder.
So that's our program for today. I hope you've enjoyed it. Join us again tomorrow for more from Consciousness Central. Bye for now.
Thank you.